Many modern RVs feature tankless or on-demand water heaters, and while they offer nearly limitless hot water when connected to city water and sewer hookups, like all RV appliances, they can still require some troubleshooting. So in this video, we're going to cover some common issues as well as how to troubleshoot them, and then I'll go into essentially talk about when it may be necessary to schedule a service appointment. So to start, there's going to be a couple basic things that we need to ensure before troubleshooting specific issues. First, if your control panel here isn't turning on, it's generally because the switch on the water heater itself is turned off. Now, it is a good idea to turn the switch off while you're storing the RV to avoid potential battery drain, but the switch does need to be in the on position for the command panel to actually function. Next, you want to make sure you're either connected to city water or you have substantial water in your fresh tank and have your water pump on. Lastly, you want to ensure that you have adequate propane to supply the burner and that when the hot side of a faucet is opened up inside, after a few seconds you hear the burner kick on. Which leads us to our first potential problem and arguably the most common, which is a lack of flame. Now, a failed ignition could have several causes, right? Such as insufficient propane supply, faulty ignition switch, or an exhaust blockage. Now, this could be a reason to have your tankless heater professionally inspected, but before you do, here's some money-saving tips that you can try. So as previously mentioned, you want to verify that there is an adequate amount of LP gas in the tank, and if you have multiple tanks, ensure that the proper tank is selected. Now, I know this may seem basic, but you also want to ensure that the LP gas valve is fully turned on. Next, you want to check your propane lines and connections for any leaks or obstructions. And then if that's all clear, you want to inspect for any loose wiring, any kind of loose connections in there, or any evidence of critter activity in the exhaust opening. Lastly, you'll want to check, clean, and reinstall faucet aerators. A lack of water flow could actually prevent the burner from igniting, which leads us to our next common problem: flow rate. So tankless water heaters are pretty sensitive to the volume of flowing water, and they're not going to work correctly if the flow is reduced too much. So the most obvious way you'll experience this is when using multiple fixtures inside your RV, right? Say that you're trying to wash dishes while your partner is showering. Chances are neither of you are going to have the water temperature that you desire. It's a bit of a hassle, but using one fixture at a time is going to be the best way to ensure a sufficient flow rate for your heater to activate. Now, that being said, another option, if you're connected to city water, is going to be something like this right here, which is an adjustable water pressure regulator. This will give you more control over your RV's water supply and allow you to essentially safely increase your water pressure to ensure that you have adequate flow rate for essentially fixtures to activate your heater. However, you do want to keep the pressure below 55 psi to avoid damaging any plumbing lines. Now, finally, unfortunately, your trusted water filtration system might be guilty of reducing your water's flow rate. While I always do recommend filtering water because water quality is going to vary from source to source, any RV water filter can reduce the flow so the water heater just doesn't come on, especially if the filter isn't regularly maintained. Now, I'm not saying not to filter, but combining a filter with an adjustable pressure regulator can possibly help you achieve the desired results. The next issue is cold water spikes. So with water heaters that have tanks, hot water comes from the tank when a hot faucet is opened. With tankless water heaters though, you might experience some spurts of cooler water between the hotter water. Some call this the cold water sandwich problem, and although it's harmless, it can certainly be annoying. So to fix it, some RV techs recommend using only the hot faucet when showering, as opposed to mixing both the hot and cold water as you would with a traditional propane or electric DSI water heater. What I recommend doing is turning the temperature on the water heater down to a more reasonable level, like 95 to 105 or so that you can only use the hot water when showering. However, let me caution you here, do not forget to turn the temperature down, or if it ever gets reset, like if the battery gets disconnected, you want to be aware of that because obviously you can get burned. Now, an alternative method would be to adjust the water flow by opening the hot water fixture a little bit further while closing the cold slightly, or vice versa, until you find a more consistent desired temp. The next issue you may encounter is mineral deposits. Now, of course, it's going to be more common in areas with harder water, but minerals can actually build up inside the water heater over time. And as mineral deposits grow, your tankless water heater's performance and efficiency is going to decrease. Now, as we discussed earlier, most RV owners use a filtration system to remove minerals, chemicals, chemicals and other contaminants. However, not all systems are going to filter out 100% of those contaminants. So if your tankless water heater has been used for a while, it may need to be decalcified. Now, as with most RV appliances, right, this process can vary depending on the appliance manufacturer, but we will have a full-length video on the general process coming soon, so if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe for notifications for when that video goes live. All right, another common problem is that your control panel is showing an error code. Now, some of the most common error codes relate to things like insufficient propane, improper venting, or lack of power. But each water heater manufacturer's error codes may signal different problems. And with that said, you'll benefit from reading your owner's manual to understand your water heater's error codes. If none of the previous tips helped, your best troubleshooting steps will depend on the error code you're seeing, but here are some common checks. Is the propane supply connection secure and leak-free? Is the water heater properly vented? Are all power connections fully plugged in? Is the battery disconnect turned on? And finally, is the battery properly installed, charged, and regularly maintained? Now, hopefully these troubleshooting tips solved your issue, but if your tankless water heater still isn't working, well, we've placed a link in the description to help you contact a certified RV service center to schedule an inspection and get your problems fixed. As always, feel free to drop a comment talking about any issues I missed or any great troubleshooting tips you know of when it comes to tankless water heaters. Thanks for watching. I'm Ian Baker, and until next time, we'll see ya.